All right, getting ready, getting everything set up here. Loading the video stream for Facebook. Give me just 1 second. That's fetching now. We're going to be recording our podcast live here in just a bit. That's all good. I have video stream for Facebook and going live there as well. So I've got that. Let me pull this back up. Appreciate you all for jumping on. Let me get Facebook open so I can kind of say hi to some people. YouTube as well. Hey, Brennan, good to see you. Coming up, I got the chat back over here. Can we see the chat back behind me? I can see the chat back behind me. It's on my big white screen right now. Once we get some more text up there, it'll pop up a little bit more. Victor, Robbie, good to see you on as well. Getting ready to record our podcast. Ethan, who's sitting right over there, joined up on Facebook. Luis, good to see you on here. Podcast episodes 24 for the private podcast, the instrument podcast, the commercial podcast, and the CFI, the Certificated Flight Instructor podcast. That's what I have on the docket to accomplish today. Hey, Tyrese, Ruli, Zalim, Elijah, Jose, Andrew, Mark, Jordan. Good to see you. Mark says, just watched another written boot camp video and saw our video coming on. Mark, that's awesome. Very cool. That's on YouTube. Also live streaming over here on Facebook. Sergio, Luis, good to see you all as well. So YouTube, if you want to comment, you can make your big debut on the TV sitting here behind me, like Jordan and Harry and Gibson and IP Medic 11 and Tay, Tom O'Sullivan. See Tom on a lot of stuff. I'm going to be live tonight, by the way, don't forget. 8 p.m. Eastern time, I'm doing a mock check ride. I'm going to call it a webinar. It's going to be a Facebook and a YouTube live stream. So on Facebook, do make sure you like the page. On YouTube, make sure you hit that little bell so you get notifications. You subscribe to us as well so you get that. So hey, Tomas from Poland. Good to see you. Let's see what's happening over here on Facebook. Dominique, Joshua, Joseph, afternoon to you as well. Josh says howdy from Fast Aviation. I like Josh. Josh plays a lot of jokes on me, though, every year at Sun and Fun, so I got to watch him sometimes. So anyways, just about ready to go live. Right, we are live with you, ready to start recording my podcast here. I always like to crowdsource this. So let me tell you what I'm doing a little bit today, and then we'll kind of crowdsource some of your ideas in here. So this is episode 24. Again, the podcasts are up on iTunes. If you just type M0A, they'll come up, but it's the private podcast, the instrument pilot podcast, the commercial pilot podcast, and the CFI, Certificated Flight Instructor podcast as well. So this is the 24th episode of those. I record, this is again a chance to kind of see behind the scenes. I may make a mistake. We may have to go back and fix something. You get to hear the polished professional product on iTunes. This is a chance to kind of see behind the scenes what we do in the studio and everything else. So let's crowdsource some ideas here, by the way. The Private Pilot Podcast. The topic today is your first passenger after your check ride. Your first passenger after some check ride. What are some considerations for your first passenger after your check ride? So let me ask you this, Facebook. Let me ask you this, YouTube. When you took up your first passenger, what are some things that crossed your mind? Maybe you're going to be approaching that day one day where you take up your first passenger. What are some thoughts that have run through your head? Is that going to be a spouse? Is that going to be a good friend? Someone from work? A fellow flying club member? Another student at your school? What's that going to look like? And what are some considerations you have for taking up your first passenger after your check ride? This is your chance to have your voice heard and make it on the Private Pilot Podcast. Emlyn, great point, said, my thought was to take only one passenger. How about just one passenger? Yeah, I totally agree with that. Absolutely. Very, very smart. You just don't need the distractions, the stress of anything extra in this here. Jim Porterfield trying to make his big debut. Jim Porterfield's a good friend of mine here. Alan talked about turbulence. Yeah, what about just picking the right day? How about, I'll put turbulence. How about right day, weather-wise? Yeah, I totally get it. Jeff on Facebook, Happy New Year to you as well. Yeah, clear weather. Great. Let's just call it weather in general. I'm just writing all these down so you guys can make when you listen to the podcast later, be like, hey, I helped contribute to that. That'd be pretty cool. Good. Harry says a good lunch destination. Yeah, where are we going? How about lunch? Let's have a purpose to where we're going. I'm putting a star and an arrow next to lunch. I have two Harry with a F last name here. In the event of emergency or anything, entire would be honest, your passenger resolving the issue. Yeah, how about we call that PAX briefing, passenger briefing. Absolutely. Absolutely. Don't take up. Yeah, and that's comes. Al, I'm reading yours. That takes them down to, explaining what's happening in a passenger briefing. That's been great. Alan says, pick out traffic. I'm running out of notes here. Pick out traffic. How can we keep them engaged? I like it. Keep engaged. Engaged here. Oh, Dominic on Facebook said G1000 alerts. That could be a big. I'm gonna add that to my passenger brief, perhaps. I mean, geez, that could make a lot of people nervous. They're hearing traffic, right? They start sweating a little bit when they start hearing that. I like that. Ken said, "Am I current?" Yeah, very well. I mean, you could go away from a check ride and not end up being current after that. Scott said, took his wife because she supported him the whole process. And absolutely. Absolutely. I like it. All right, let's get, I was reading some more comments here. Let's go ahead and let's get into podcast mode real quick here. So comments will still stream on YouTube behind me, Facebook. I'm going to just change screens here for a second. I already checked audio, so that's all good. You're going to hear me talk to a gentleman whose name is Tom. Tom might be watching this. Tom works for M0A.com. Tom edits all these podcasts. So you'll hear me actually give Tom kind of the video or the audio, I guess, notes to everything. So you'll be able to hear that. I can check. Yep, I can hear my audio loud and clear as well. That's all well and good. Let's go Private Pilot Podcast, episode 24. Let's roll into it. Starting this recording. Hey, Tom, Jason here, Private Pilot Podcast 24. The title, Your First Passenger After Your Check Ride. I also like your description here. What are some considerations for your first passenger after your check ride? I'll be quiet for a second, grab a sip of tea, and we'll roll into it. What are some considerations for your first passenger after your check ride? Hey everyone, Jason Schappert here of M0A.com, and you're listening to the Private Pilot Podcast, brought to you by our #1 rated online ground school, GroundSchoolAcademy.com. Complete private instrument commercial pilot online ground school. Pass your knowledge test, your written test, pass your check ride, but most importantly, we're setting you out to make you that safe, real-world pilot, teaching you beyond the books, beyond the checklist, beyond and above the regulations, beyond even the ACS, Airman Certification Standards. We're trying to make you the best pilot possible. Visit GroundSchoolAcademy.com to check it out and learn why it's the #1 rated online ground school. Today we're talking about your first flight. Well, really, your first passenger after your check ride. You've been studying forever for this check ride. They often say that your check ride is really your first flight with a passenger, and that's very true. But what I want to talk about is your first flight with a passenger of your choosing. Not everybody chooses to go flying with an FAA designated pilot examiner when they get the chance, right? Who is that first passenger going to be? And what are some considerations when operating and flying with that first passenger? And we I was able to really crowdsource a lot of this information too, on top of coming up with some of our own ideas from the m0a.com team here in the studio. But while I'm recording these, I actually live stream these as well on YouTube, on Facebook, so you can always watch the behind the scenes of how this is made. But just here's some of the things we really came up with crowdsourcing this to the great m0a.com communities we have on YouTube and on Facebook. First things first is this person kind of scared or apprehensive? Now, if you want to be the one to set out and help them overcome that fear of flying, by all means, that is an excellent endeavor to partake on. I don't know if that's the best endeavor for you to partake on for your first flight, your first passenger, because you yourself are going to be nervous. Do you really want to take a passenger up who's already nervous and kind of add to some of that anxiety? You know, it's really not my idea of a good time with that. So is this person kind of scared, a little bit apprehensive? Is this their first flight? Because if so, think of it. How long of a trip should we really consider going on? Is it a quick trip out to the practice area? Is it a quick trip to a familiar airport? And by the way, this isn't the time to start exploring new airports just yet, unless you're going with somebody who already knows those airports and has flown to some of these airports. But this is an opportunity for you to choose a flight to a familiar airport, preferably one that has some lunch. You know, we all want to fly to a destination, right? We have to have a purpose to fly sometimes, and flying to a lunch destination is a great way to accomplish that. Where can we fly that we're giving people a rhyme, a reason, a goal to actually end up flying to? But I encourage you to go to that familiar airport. It's something you're already used to. Here's some other ideas, some other considerations, again, from our great YouTube and Facebook community. The idea of just taking one passenger. I just need one person. You may be flying a 172, Piper Archer. It doesn't matter what it is, but it may have 3 extra seatbelts. I would just take one passenger. You're already nervous. You don't need 2 extra personalities, 2 extra things to worry about, 2 extra things to focus on. You need to focus on, first off, most importantly, safely operating that airplane, and then your one passenger, right? We don't have to think about all these other passengers, all these other dynamics, because it becomes exponential. Your first passenger should be a single passenger. And I know you may say, Jace, I want to take the wife and take the kids. Well, take the wife somewhere, and then plan a second flight and take the kids somewhere. We don't need all these extra dynamics, all these little extra issues to really think about, to really consider here. So just watch that and really be mindful of that as you're considering it. What about choosing the appropriate weather? Having the weather just be perfect. I don't want to go out there on a day. I don't want to go out there on a I want to go out there when the weather conditions are simply just perfect in this case. That's what I really want to do, what I really want to strive for. I want to go and fly in those perfect weather conditions to make it much easier on myself, really, is what I'm after in this case here. So think about that. What about an appropriate passenger briefing? We've studied, we've prepped for a passenger briefing, we've done this bit of work here. But someone came up on, I believe it was on YouTube, and it was just very smart, that beyond the passenger brief, what about a G1000 brief? What about all those crazy alerts and things we're going to hear when it's going traffic, and altitude? It's going to be calling out all these different things that you're going to hear, they're going to see. You might want to just alert them that, hey, you may hear these kinds of things. In fact, you may hear traffic alerts, and actually, I want you to be able to help me pick out traffic. And this is how we scan for traffic. This is how we watch for traffic. And it's just something else to kind of watch, and you're keeping now your passenger engaged. Give them something to do. Help them stay engaged in the process. It's going to make it that much easier. But you, again, your first passenger is going to be kind of a nerve-wracking experience for yourself. Make it as easy as possible on yourself. Go to a familiar airport. Don't plan a crazy long cross country. Go somewhere familiar for lunch. Just take one passenger. Give them an appropriate passenger briefing. Your brief could start the night before, just kind of tell them what to expect. Then we can continue it again in the airplane. But give them that appropriate passenger briefing specific to your airplane and give them little tasks to do. Tell them about a sterile cockpit. Educate them. You are now an ambassador for aviation. And it's important you work to grow aviation each and every time you take up someone who is a non-pilot. That's a new great responsibility that you've inherited with now having your private pilot certificate. Listen, thank you so much for making the Private Pilot Podcast one of the top-rated, most listened to aviation podcasts on iTunes. We certainly couldn't do it without you. Just what a blessing you all are. I hope you just accomplish all your aviation goals that you set out to. Continue on from private to instrument to commercial to CFI, whatever it may be. Keep in mind our other great aviation podcasts as well: the Instrument Pilot Podcast, the Commercial Pilot Podcast, and of course the CFI Certificated Flight Instructor Podcast as well. Enjoy the rest of your day, and most importantly, remember that a good pilot is always learning. Have a great day, guys. We'll see ya. All right, that's fixed. YouTube, Facebook, sorry for a little audio issue. Got that fixed, I believe, but obviously the audio that you were receiving and the audio that was doing the podcast were two different things, so the podcast will still be okay. Let me save that. What'd you guys think? Anything I could have done better? Would have said differently, perhaps? Then we're going to move on to instrument as well. Quick and to the point. That's kind of the goal. I mean, no need to create a big, long, lengthy podcast. The goal is to make these kind of quick, to the point, something for your commute, whatever it may be. That's what I'm really after to create here. Let me start creating the project for instrument 24. This is going to be on currency versus proficiency. I cannot talk about this enough. This is my big theme going into 2018, currency versus proficiency, if you haven't noticed that already. Anything you guys want to add for currency versus proficiency? We're going to talk about the difference of currency versus proficiency as it pertains to instrument flying. We're going to talk current is part 6157, 6 approaches, holding, intercepting. What is proficiency and how do you define proficiency? That's what we're really going to be after here. So let's see here. Head over to YouTube, head over to Facebook. Let me look at some of this. Pull Facebook back up so I can kind of see what you guys are saying over here. Again, 8 p.m. Eastern tonight, big Facebook, YouTube Live mock check ride. You won't want to miss that. So let me read some more. Nathaniel, thanks for that. Jay, great ideas. Harry says, stay in the system. Yeah, you're right. It's so easy, especially on like a pretty day. I'm just going to go VFR. Stay in the system of just flight training, though, I think is important as well. Don said, well said, Jason. Make sure your passengers use the facilities prior to takeoff. You couldn't be more correct on that, my friend. Absolutely, that is correct. Hey, Dustin, good to see you on here. Again, I like the long podcast too. I'm trying to crank out 4 at a time here. You can just listen to all 4 back to back. It'll seem like one long podcast, I think, if you put it all that way. Maybe that would work out. All right, let's see. Anybody else have anything they want to add to the Instrument Pilot Podcast, currency versus proficiency? Really, and again, currency versus proficiency doesn't have to just be the Instrument Pilot Podcast. It could really be anything with that. So let's read some more here. Alan said to keep proficient must have a plan. Yes. All this comes down to, all of this I'm going to say here equals a plan. Agenda each month. Login requirements, who can be safety. Yeah, good point. Actual IMC, I'm certainly going to talk about that. I'm going to underline it here. Yeah, how about, I like Someone talk about listening to ATC. I'm just going to put live ATC down here as a great way to work to stay proficient. Jeff says, does this bitter cold make a different go or no go? Absolutely does. I don't want to go outside, let alone you can get in an airplane. It's going to take forever to warm up sometimes. It was real cold in Florida for us wimpy Floridians. It was supposed to snow, but it didn't. We're a little further south than where that's all at. We're north central Florida, north of Orlando a little bit. So nothing good, just nasty cold rain is all we had today. And tomorrow's supposed to be like 27. So for Florida, that's real cold. Now, you're saying I'd kill to have 27 right now. It's real cold. But man, certainly just having to preheat the airplane, what a process. I couldn't even imagine going through that. Alan said work on weaknesses. Yeah, plan. Work on our weaknesses. Different types of approaches. Someone said read approach plates. How about the plates? I like it. All right, let's go into instrument pilot podcast mode real quick. All right, check. That looks good. Hey Tom, Jason here, Instrument Pilot Podcast 24. Currency, let's call it current versus proficient. I like your description. What are the differences between currency and proficiency? All right, sip of tea, I'll be quiet, and we'll roll. What are the differences between currency and proficiency? Hey everyone, Jason Schappert here of M0A.com, and you're listening to the Instrument Pilot Podcast, brought to you by our #1 rated online ground school, GroundSchoolAcademy.com. Complete knowledge test prep, check ride prep, but most importantly, setting you out to make you that safe, real-world instrument pilot, teaching you beyond the ACS, beyond the checklist. Visit GroundSchoolAcademy.com to check it out and learn more today. What are the differences between being a current pilot and being a proficient pilot? Let's take it a step further and say, what are the differences between being a current instrument pilot and being a proficient instrument pilot? You see, the FAA defines currency under 6157. I need to accomplish 6 instrument approaches, holding procedures, and intercepting and tracking courses through the use of navigational electronic systems is how it's defined in plain English in 6157. 6 approaches in 6 months. That's what the FAA defines as current. In addition to that, I need to be current with my flight review, current with my medical, and depending if I have passengers or not, there's a few other little things in there, right? That's currency, and that's well and good. But that is the bare minimum you can do. Think of it this way. A very smart check ride examiner once said this to me, and it's just always stuck with me. He said, Jason, the ACS is the worst you can do and still become a pilot. Have you ever thought of the ACS that way? The worst you can do and still become a pilot. So I'm here to tell you 6157 is the least amount you can do and still be an instrument pilot. And when you say it that way, it kind of brings a different tune, like the least I can do. If you went up to your friend who you said, man, we got to make it to this business meeting, it's an IFR day, we're going to have to shoot an approach down in, and he's going to say, well, is everything good? You're going to say, yeah, I did the least amount I could do to legally make this flight. How is your passenger going to feel when you say that to them, right? Because that's essentially what you're doing with currency. You are doing just enough to be legal, just enough to be a little bit dangerous, shall we say. So then what is proficiency? Proficiency is, would I take my son or daughter or spouse flying? Proficiency is, would I take my coworker flying? That's what proficiency really is. If currency is the least I can do and still be, legal, proficiency is above and beyond that. So what are some items we can do to maintain proficiency? Because if you're working on an instrument rating, or you are a, shall I use the word current, instrument pilot, you know that the principle of disuse sneaks up faster in instrument flying than it does in any other certificate or rating you are going to pursue. Think about proficiency this way. How can we increase the overall number of approaches and holds and intercepting and tracking we do? Maybe you say, you know what? 6 is what the FAA says. It's 8 for me. Or maybe the 6 is fine, but it's going to be 6 totally different, 6 extremely challenging instrument approaches, different types, reading different plates, shooting approaches I've never shot before, into different airports I've never been to before, finding new ways to challenge myself. Maybe it means getting actual time versus hood time. If you've been following me for any amount of time, you know I have been talking about currency versus proficiency. It's just my theme all of last year, all of this year, and for years to come. I'm getting way ahead of myself and outside the scope of this topic. This is more like the CFI podcast kind of topic, but one of the hardest things for a flight instructor to teach is good decision making. Put yourself in the shoes of a flight instructor. I've got, for the instrument rating, 20 to 30 hours with you to instill in you how to make good decisions in the instrument environment. That's not a lot of time, right? To teach good decision making. You know, parents get 18 years to teach their children good decision making. I get 20 or 30 hours with you to teach you how to make smart go and no-go decisions, how to teach good decisions. A proficient pilot knows how to set hard set personal minimums to succeed, to make those smart go and no-go decisions. The hardest thing you'll teach. One of those great ways to build up those hard set personal minimums is to fly in actual conditions. And again, just like I say, currency versus proficiency, probably, 100 times a day. The second most used thing that I say is get yourself actual IFR time. The difference between hood time, foggle time, simulated time, whatever you want to call it, versus actual IFR is a night and day difference. Hood work, the simulated IFR, is nowhere close, not even the same league as flying in real IFR conditions. Not even close. And yet I know people who've earned their instrument rating having never stuck their head in an actual cloud. And that's scary to me. Because the moment you do it, you will realize what an immersive experience it is. Because it's never that perfect little stratus layer you expect. It's that cumulus layer you're going down through. And you're being immersed in the clouds. You see the rush of the clouds going past you. You're getting bumped around, catching updrafts and downdrafts. And it is an immersive experience. And I'm telling you, hopefully you're nodding your head right now going, yes, absolutely, you have to get actual IFR time. There is such a difference. Let's continue with this theme of proficiency. What about your total hours? What are your total hours? VFR or IFR? Let's combine them both. In the past 30 days, the past 90 days, the past 6 months, the past year. Do you have flying goals set up like that? In school, we set goals. In business, we set goals. In our jobs, we have goals. Do you have goals for your logbook? Do you have a 30-day goal? I want to fly 4 hours, an hour a week. That's my goal this month. 90 days, you have quarterly goals. I want to keep up with my hour a week plan, plus I want to fly 1 long cross country each quarter. Like, these aren't hard goals to achieve. 6 months, 1 year goals. Do you have these flying goals set? And then do you have backup plans? Because you know what? You're going to plan that beautiful cross country one day and you're going to get a really crummy day that greatly exceeds your personal minimums. We learned how to make good decisions, and you make the good decision not to go that day, but to reschedule for next week. And you do that instead. You have to work towards that. When I record these, we live stream it on YouTube and on Facebook, and I encourage you to watch as well. It's a lot of fun. Just kind of do it in the middle of the afternoon, and you can leave it playing in the background on YouTube and on Facebook. But I always ask the audience before I start recording the podcast, kind of some of their ideas and some of the things we came up with. You know, obviously we talk about the idea of different approaches, but reading different approach plates. Really the theme of staying in the system. By that, I mean the IFR system. It could be the flight train system too, but staying in the IFR system. It's so easy when you go out there and it is a gorgeous IFR day to just go, gorgeous IFR day. It's like an oxymoron, right? To some. It's a gorgeous VFR day. It's so easy just to go, I'll just get VFR flight following. I don't need to fly IFR. And we only file IFR when we have to. File IFR even on those gorgeous days, just to get priority into the busy airport. You may not get the perfect direct to routing that you want to, but you'll make up for it because you'll get better routing, better sequencing coming into the actual airport, and it'll all kind of wash even here. But most importantly, it keeps you in the system. Like I was sharing with your 30, 90, 6 month, and 1 year goals, what's the action plan here? Beyond just those flights, having a plan. What are your weaknesses? What are some things we can work on? That's where we want to kind of structure this. You don't have to, just because you earned your instrument rating, doesn't mean you have to stop flying with a CFII. You can still go up and fly with a CFII. I hate using, it's not a license, it's a certificate. It's easy to say it's a license to learn. It's really a certificate to learn. But it truly is. You don't have to just fly with a flight instructor every 24 calendar months when your flight review is due. You can go up with instructors more often than that. And then what are some things we can do when we're not flying to work towards proficiency? What about chair flying? What about liveatc.net? What about being that airport bum and just spending time immersing yourself in the system, even on the ground? All excellent ideas. Listen, thank you so much for making the Instrument Pilot podcast one of the most listened to, highest reviewed, best reviewed aviation podcasts on iTunes. We certainly couldn't do it without you. Be sure to check out our other great podcasts, the Private Pilot Podcast, the Commercial Pilot Podcast, and the CFI Certificated Flight Instructor Podcast. Be sure to visit m0a.com, follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube so you see these great live notifications, all the great videos that we do. And I hope you'll think of us when that knowledge test comes up, when that check ride is near, or you know what, when you want to excel and be a proficient pilot, we are here for you. Enjoy the rest of your day, and most importantly, remember that a good pilot is always learning. Have a great day, guys. We'll see ya. All right, YouTube, all right, Facebook, Instrument Pilot Podcast 24 done. Let me save that real quick. What did you guys think? Again, good pilots always learning. What could I have done better? What I leave out? What could I have said differently? What didn't make sense to you? I am here to learn just as much as you are as well. And that is what we are here to do, most certainly. Going to be doing the Commercial Pilot Podcast next. Again, all of these will be up on iTunes. These are a few weeks out, but there's new episodes coming up weekly, I think every 10 days. Again, we're kind of building up a big queue, especially with my crazy travel schedule. I'm not always able to do this. A couple announcements. Again, remember, tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, I'm doing a mock check ride live. I'm going to ask actual FAA check ride questions. You won't want to miss that. It's going to be really, really good. I just hope you'll set tonight aside. Yes, it'll be recorded, but there's nothing like being on there live where I can call you out by name and work on you with the questions and kind of work to formulate that. So really great stuff. Commercial pilot podcast, so I'm going to do next. And the topic, anybody, you don't have to be a commercial pilot to contribute to this one. How to avoid complacency. What are some things you can do to avoid complacency in the airplane? Is a description. I'll read a few of those. And I'm going to go ahead and read some comments here from Facebook first. Jeff, appreciate you. Let's see, reading some more here. All right. Oliver in Belgium, good to see you. Hey, Scott, good to see you on here. Kevin, I may do a mock check ride for CFI initial. Gosh, my check ride for CFI was 4 hours. It was not an easy day. Let's head over to YouTube, see what's happening here. Dustin said, just went up last month with an instructor to work on short field approaches and power off 180s. Dustin, by the way, brand new aircraft owner. Awesome guy, one of our lifetime members as well. Jeff, appreciate you, man. Thank you so much. Dustin wants to know if there's going to be a Russ cam for the mock check ride tonight. We'll have to make Russ stick around, huh, John? I think we may have to do that. I mean, everyone needs more Russ in their life, you know. All right. Reading some more scheduled. Robert said scheduled the knowledge test. Awesome, man. Great for you. Very cool. That's the big thing. Oh, there's the Russ cam. Everyone loves the Russ cam. You know, I mean, it's no fun when Jason's on the Russ cam, but the Russ cam, by the way, for those who don't know, obviously Russ is our director. Oh, I'm gonna text Russ and tell him to come make a debut real quick. Hold on one second. Let's see. Hold on. Russ is probably watching this going, I hope he doesn't really text me. Give me a second. I'll just call Russ. Russ is like one office over, but this just makes it way easier. I'll put him on speakerphone so everybody can hear. Sure. Hey, do you want to make a debut? Okay, great. All right, coming out. See you in a bit. I can hear him listening to me in the background. A little delay. I'm trying to explain to everybody what the Russ cam is, Russ. So anyways, the Russ Cam, our online ground school members, every Monday night I do a webinar with our online ground school members. Russ is our director. Oh, you gotta make the full appearance, Russ. I mean, did you get hair and makeup done? I'm a little worried about you. So Russ is our director of, we can't share a chair or anything like that. That's where it just gets awkward. So we flash up this lower third where it says the Russ Cam. That's my Photoshop handiwork over there. And Russ sits over there and kind of answers the question with the team and always kind of does something ridiculous. But I'm realizing, and we do this every Monday night with our ground school members, every time Russ is more popular than like everyone, like, I don't know if you're watching the comments, it's hashtag RussCam. Everybody wants more Russ, you know, I mean, see, look, will there be a Russ cam on the mock check ride tonight? Like, everybody wants more Russ. I don't know what's up with that. It's kind of,
I don't either.
You know,
so that's good.
Your head,
that's good for me.
You're getting a big head. You know, it's job security at the same time, though, too.
There you go. There you go.
Would you guys be interested in the idea of maybe for podcast 25 doing like a maintenance podcast, having Russ on board? We're doing a maintenance video series too. We'll be coming out here very soon. How is that coming along, by the way, Russ?
Slowly, but it's coming.
All right, good. Yep. Just making sure I worry about you sometimes.
I know.
So, anyways, appreciate making the debut.
Okay, thanks. Boy, that was easy.
Yeah, I mean, everyone want to know what the Russ cam was. So
if that's all I got to do all day, I'm good.
Yeah, exactly. You earned your paycheck today, you know, I can say, so. Russ Loving, I mean, who doesn't, with a last name like Loving, who doesn't love the guy? So, anyways, Commercial Pilot Podcast 24, let's get ready for that here. I'm going to go into, anybody else, do they have something you want to add, by the way? How to avoid complacency? Anything else you guys want to add here? Let's, here's a log with checkpoints. Checks, yeah, absolutely. Look, everyone's saying more Russ. That's just it's just kind of a big head after all this, John. I don't know what to do here. Awesome. Awesome. All right, let's go ahead. Let's go into Commercial Pilot Podcast mode here. I'll make sure my phone's on silent from when I called Russ. I'm going to grab a sip of tea. All right, headphones coming back on. It's just one page. Heading back over here. Oh, I got to create a new project. Give me just 1 second here. Whoops. Almost ready. All right, let me just save this. CP-24. All right, let me start recording and let's roll. Hey Tom, Jason here, Commercial Pilot Podcast 24. How to Avoid Complacency is the title, and I like your description. What are some things you can do to avoid complacency in the airplane? Give me just a second here and we will get started. What are some things you can do to avoid complacency in the airplane? Hey everyone, Jason Schappert here of M0A.com, and you are listening to the Commercial Pilot Podcast, brought to you by our #1 rated online ground school. Visit groundschoolacademy.com. You see, the online ground school is more than just a place to pass your knowledge test, pass your check ride. We're setting out to make you a safe, real-world pilot, and we do that. It's really a community. It's not just here's a course and good luck. It is a mentorship. You feel like you know each and every M0A.com employee by the time you're done and have passed your check ride, and you are that safe, real-world pilot. Just ask any of our members. I'm sure they'd be more than happy to tell you about how great the M0A.com community really is. Visit groundschoolacademy.com to check it out and learn more. What are some ways we can work to avoid complacency? Now, this topic could have been in the Commercial Pilot Podcast. It could have been in the Private Pilot Podcast. It doesn't matter where we put this because these tips are truly universal. What are some ways we can work to avoid complacency? One thing I teach, and again, this is not going to be a promo for our books or our courses and what we do. I'm just going to share something that anybody can benefit. I mean, M0A.com, I'm sure you've realized by now, our business model is to give away the best stuff, hoping and knowing that you'll come back for the paid aspect of things, the books, the courses, whatever it is, when the time is right for you. We are not salesy one bit. So when I say I want you to read to keep your head in the game, I'm not going to share any of my books. I'm going to share free FAA publications, and if you want to read our books, by all means, but read to keep your head in the game. Do you own a copy of what's called the PHAK, Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge, abbreviated PHAK? Do you own a copy of the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge? It is the encyclopedia of flying. It is a tome of a book, but it's something you should certainly own. Second on that list is the Airplane Flying Handbook. Other things to think about. What about there's the Instrument Flying Handbook, the Instrument Procedures Handbook, the Weight and Balance Handbook, Aviation Weather for Naval Aviators. There's just so many great publications that are put out by the FAA that you could go download a free PDF of any of those titles that I mentioned, like right now. You could buy the paperback version if you're a paperback kind of person, but you could literally get the most current, up-to-date version in a PDF form and just have it right now of all those books. Are you reading to keep your head in the game? I understand we're not all able to fly as much as we want. Maybe it's time, maybe it's money, maybe it's weather, but we're not able to get in as many hours and much time in an airplane as we'd like to. You have to read to keep your head in the game, to keep yourself engaged. It's just important that we continue to do that here. What about staying sharp on our maneuvers? We can read all about our maneuvers. We can chair fly all our maneuvers, but are you taking time to brush up on some of our ACS, commercial pilot, maneuvers? I'll tell you, it's mind-boggling to me that I'll do a flight review with students oftentimes, and I'll chat with them and say, when's the last time you did steep turns and slow flight and stalls? I'll look in their logbook, or sometimes they'll just tell me, and they'll go, man, I guess 24 months ago, Jason, the last time you did a flight review with me. Like, why are we just flying point A to point B? Why aren't we getting out and finding different ways to challenge ourselves, different ways to engage in aviation, still going out to the practice area? You can do your maneuvers solo. Get out there, remain engaged, and continue to practice slow flight. What about, some people call it takeoff and landing stalls, approach and departure stalls, power on, power off stalls, whatever you call them. Practice your stalls, steep turns, ground reference maneuvers, your commercial pilot maneuvers, landings. You are either an aspiring or a soon-to-be commercial pilot or already a commercial pilot. Gone are the days of just landing and being thankful you got the airplane down, right? I mean, obviously that's the goal every time. But it steps up a notch. Every landing should have a purpose. I'm going to put it down on the number 5. I'm going to land on the beginning of the second centerline stripe. I'm going to make this one a short field. I'm going to make this one a soft field. I'm going to make this one a power off 180. I'm going to go no flaps. I'm going to slip into land. Try and do different things to keep your skills sharp. I keep sharing about currency versus proficiency, right? But it is it's so much more than just that. We get complacency that sneaks in often when we just do the same thing over and over. Fly point A to point B, do a normal landing, do a normal takeoff, and that's it. You only practice the short field, the soft field when you have to. But practice it when you don't have to, so when you do have to perform that, it's just a non-event for you. What about other ways to avoid complacency? Just remaining engaged. Plan and fly somewhere you've never been, somewhere you've never seen. Make your aviation bucket list. What are some of your aviation bucket list type items? You want to fly to Catalina Island. You want to fly to, first landings in North Carolina. You want to fly to Key West. You want to fly to North Captiva Island. You want to overfly the Grand Canyon and the Hoover Dam. You want to land at Sedona. Where is it you want to fly to? What is that aviation bucket list? Maybe it's not a destination. Maybe it's, I want to fly with the spouse to go see the grandkids. What is it for you? I want to start flying more for business. What is your aviation bucket list? And how does that work now to not just keep you current, not just keep you proficient, but help you avoid complacency? Make sure all of that aligns, avoiding complacency while maintaining proficiency. Man, if you can get your bucket list to align with that, if everybody could do that, my goodness, the aviation accident rate would be cut in half if we could pull that off. A while ago, we made a feature-length movie called Flying Again. And we worked with 8 rusty pilots on really their journey back into the cockpit. And while we were doing that, we noticed, talking to these 8 rusty pilots, is they all, gave up something that they loved, which was aviation, usually for someone they loved. Maybe it was for a son or a daughter to go to college. Maybe it was because a job transfer, an illness, or a death in the family, whatever it is. But they all, gave up something they loved, flying, for someone they loved. And they needed to find that reason, that spark, that way to get back into aviation. They needed to find their purpose to get engaged in aviation again. I encourage you to never lose that purpose, but be willing and ready to adapt that purpose. If your purpose right now is to fly to go see the grandkids, the grandkids are going to get old one day. They're going to go to college. They're going to move beyond the capabilities of what your airplane can do. You have to airline it to go see them. It may all change. Be willing to change your purpose and make that adaptation as well. So listen, some great ways to avoid complacency. Keep your head in the game. Keep reading to keep your head in the game. Stay sharp on your maneuvers. Fly somewhere you've never been before. See something you haven't seen. Go to new airports. Try new airport restaurants. Really work through that. Thank you so much, by the way, for making the Commercial Pilot Podcast one of the most listened to, and certainly a favorite aviation podcast on iTunes. Don't forget, we also have the Private Pilot Podcast, the Instrument Pilot Podcast, and the CFI Certificated Flight Instructor Podcast as well. Enjoy the rest of your day, and most importantly, remember that a good pilot is always learning. Have a great day, guys. We'll see you. All right, YouTube and Facebook, Commercial Pilot Podcast in the can, saving that. What did you guys think? Anything you would have added in there? Let's go get ready for CFI Podcast now. Saving this. What time is it? Okay, time-wise. Evaluation versus critique. Getting into some FOI principles now. Let's go say hi to some people on YouTube, hi to some people on Facebook real quick. Again, 8 p.m. Eastern tonight. I mean, it's almost 5 o'clock. So, I got 3 hour slots going live, so I'm going to finish these, rest up, and get ready for that here as well. It's going to be really, really good. You won't want to miss it, I promise. Let's see, evaluation versus critique is my next one. I'm doing a mock check ride tonight, if that's what you guys were asking here. Justin, kind of reading your comment. Congratulations on that as well. Grant, thank you for that. I appreciate it, my friend. Justin, great comment. Appreciate that. All right. Matt, great question. What is on my bucket list? For me, my bucket list right now consists of flying different airplanes. You saw that Piper Cub that I did a few videos in a few months ago. We ended up actually acquiring that Piper Cub. And for myself, getting in that and learning real, true stick and rudder skills. I mean, leaving the door down, flying, at 500-foot traffic pattern, 65 horsepower engine, no electrical system, like real raw flying like that, and accomplishing that. And I need to get better at that here moving forward with 2018. Earned my seaplane rating, was a very proficient seaplane pilot, and that's something I need to get back into. I'm not even a current seaplane pilot right now. And there were some maintenance issues with the plane and a lot of excuses and such, but something I need to get back into as well. But certainly some great bucket list things. Flying into all these great fly-ins that we're going to. We're looking at the AOPA fly-in, Sun and Fun Oshkosh, and having our aviation presence there as well. So just great things. Jeff, we would love for you to fly from Ohio to Ocala, say hi to the M08 team. We would be here for you, man. Would absolutely love that. Let me knock out the CFI podcast. This one's going to take a little bit of work on my part. I have quite a bit of notes here. I'm going to do my best to breeze through it here for time's sake. And then I'm going to probably go find some dinner and get ready to go live again tonight with our mock check ride. You guys are really, again, 8 p.m. Eastern tonight. Please set a calendar alert. Whatever you have to do, you're going to want to be here. It's going to be it won't be obviously this is a nice small live stream where I can kind of say hi to each person on an individual basis. Tonight will not be that way. It'll be a couple hundred people. So just on each network, Facebook and YouTube. So now's your chance to say hi as well, because it's going to be a zoo tonight, I imagine. All right. I am going to work through these the best I can. I got a lot of notes. I got to do a lot of reading. So. Excuse me. All right. Let's get into some of this here. CFI podcast, then we're done. And like I said, I'm going to take a little break, and we're going to go live again tonight at 8. All right. Let's go. Hey, Tom, Jason here, CFI Podcast 24, Evaluation versus Critique. I like your description. What is the difference between an evaluation and a critique, and which is more effective? Let's get into it here. What is the difference between an evaluation and a critique, and which is more effective? Hey everyone, Jason Schappert here of M0A.com, and you're listening to the CFI Certificated Flight Instructor Podcast, brought to you by our #1 rated online ground school, groundschoolacademy.com. CFIs, did you know we pay you a commission for every student you send our way? If your students are already using our great M0A.com ground school books and products here, we pay you a commission every time one of your students buys a product of ours. So do check that out. Send in a support ticket through M0A.com to learn more on that. We're talking about today evaluation versus critique. And really, what is more effective? Which one of those? To evaluate a student or to critique a student? And honestly, what you'll find, the conclusion we're going to end up coming to, just to let the cat out of the bag early, is it depends on your teaching style. But again, your teaching style has to adapt to your student. Let's talk about some just basic definitions here, and then I'm going to dive into reading a little bit from the Aviation Instructor's Handbook. Evaluate is defined as to judge or determine the significance, worth, or quality of something. To assess is to evaluate. To critique is to review or analyze critically. Look at the keywords there. Evaluate uses words like judge, to determine if something has significance, worth, quality. Whereas critique uses words like review and analyze. Does an evaluation have an instructor bias in it that we need to be aware of? Maybe something that we learned in times past, whatever it may be. Let's dive into the Aviation Instructor's Handbook. If you want some homework, again, free publication from the FAA. I'm going to be reading from page 223, page 59, and page 7-8 in there. Let's start with the evaluation versus the critique. I'm going to read a little bit here, and then we're going to work to summarize this. In the initial stages of skill acquisition, practical suggestions are more valuable to the student than a grade. Early evaluation is usually teacher-oriented. It provides a check on teaching effectiveness, can be used to predict eventual student learning proficiency, and it can help the teacher locate special problem areas. The observations on which the evaluations are based on also can identify the student's strengths and weaknesses, a prerequisite for making constructive criticism. So it's saying here, before I can provide constructive criticism, going back to our definition of critique, a critique is to review or analyze critically, using the word critically. Let's change that for constructive criticisms. But it says here, the observations on which evaluations are based also identify the student's strengths and weaknesses, which is a prerequisite for constructive criticism. So what this is saying here is I must evaluate before I can truly critique. You see, in evaluation, although the definition uses words like to judge, to determine if something's right, wrong, significant, of worth, the quality of it, well, I have to make that judgment. But what am I making the judgment based on? Well, it's based on the ACS. Remember, the ACS, the worst you can do and still become a pilot. Again, that definition always cracks me up. The worst I can do and still become a pilot here. But again, I have to judge. I have to evaluate that did this steep turn, this slow flight, this stall meet or exceed ACS guidelines? That's what I really have to work to do here. So yes, I have to make that judging call here because it's the next step to actually being able to critique someone. So, which brings us to the next point. Now we know what we have to start with a basic evaluation, and that's what I would do working with a new student. I would evaluate where they're at in their flying. I'm making a judgment call on where I believe their flying is at. It makes sense. We then move to the critique. And again, that was back in 5-9 in the Aviation Instructor's Handbook, which is now critiques and oral assessments, verbal assessments. Used in conjunction with either traditional or authentic assessment, the critique is an instructor-to-student assessment. These methods can also be used either individually or in a classroom setting, as discussed earlier. Let me talk about that a little bit earlier. The word critique sometimes has a negative connotation, and the instructor needs to avoid using this method as an opportunity to be overly critical of student performance. An effective critique considers good as well as bad performance. the individual parts, relationships of the individual parts, and the overall performance. A critique can and usually should be as varied in content as the performance being evaluated. A critique can be oral, written, or both. It should come immediately after a student's performance. That's so important here. While the details of the performance are easy to recall. An instructor may critique any activity a student performs or practices to improve a skill. There's that word proficiency and learning. A critique may be conducted privately or before the entire class. A critique presented before the entire class can be beneficial to every student in the classroom as well as the student who performed the exercise or the assignment. In this case, however, the instructor should avoid embarrassing the student in front of the class. There are several useful ways to conduct the critique, and we're going to talk about each of those here in just a second. But you see, I love how I find the Aviation Instructor Handbook is one of the most real things the FAA has ever written, honestly. I mean, I know we all read some things, you go, that's not what really happens in the real world. But you read this, you go, you know what? Yeah, the word critique does have a negative connotation. I don't like the idea of being critiqued. I might ask for feedback. I may say, what could I do better? But when you use the word critique, it just kind of has that negative connotation. And they talk about, too, you can do a critique in front of the entire class, and it can be beneficial to do that, but not to serve as an embarrassment or at the expense of any one particular student. So we have to be careful with how we conduct these critiques. And here's the styles of critiques they actually give us here. We can do an instructor-student critique, where it's just one-on-one in this case. We could do something I find very effective, is a student-led critique. I ask my student, what do you think went well? And they tell me, what do you think could use some improvement? And then I can then provide some feedback with that as well. But oftentimes, when you have a student point out some of their flaws, it makes it much easier because you realize when a student is at a level where he or she can recognize their own weaknesses, my goodness, you're onto something big. You're very close to a check ride, to a solo, to a breakthrough out of a plateau in flight training. When you sit down with a student and they go, yeah, I need to get better. I have been off center line and I know why, because I'm not getting enough right rudder in there. And man, when they can now correlate, to use another FOI term, all of these items, it makes your life, your job as an instructor, so much easier. What about a small group critique? Small group could just be, I have a student up front, I have a student in the back seat, everyone sees the lesson, we go through it. It could be a critique of multiple choice assessment that I give in a ground school type environment. We can work through that. It could be an individual student critique, one-on-one. It could also be a written critique. And written critiques are very effective too. You as an instructor, we're not all, myself, I can be very verbose. I can be very repetitive. I can be, you guys know I talk with my hands, all these things, right? Well, sometimes that can be overwhelming. My personality can be overwhelming for a student perhaps. It's beneficial oftentimes to give a written critique. And I as the instructor, you as the instructor, have to know and adapt your teaching methods, your evaluation methods, and your critique methods to the student. Maybe an email or a written critique, right, is the best way to get this across to your student. Maybe they need to sit down and collect their thoughts. Maybe you as the instructor need to sit down and collect your thoughts. By the time you get back home and decompress from it, yes, we want to do the critique while it's still fresh, but you may need a moment or two, an hour or two, to decompress, to relax, and write out the critique, to make some notes. I'm always taking notes in the airplane, and I'll tell students, I'm taking notes, good, bad, indifferent, it doesn't matter. I just take just because I'm writing, it's not something bad. It could be the best thing you ever did. So it's just to jog my memory on, when I was instructing real heavy, it was 5 and 6 students a day, hour and a half flight lessons, plus post-flight, debriefs and pre-flight briefs, and it just became so much here. So to be as efficient with time and to honor my students' time, I had to take notes so I could provide either an effective evaluation or an effective critique. But the purpose of this podcast, I want you to realize that there is such a difference between an evaluation, where you're kind of the judge, I am evaluating where this person is at, versus a critique, where I'm providing, candid feedback as to, not scolding, but providing feedback as to what could be done better and what went well. Don't forget, critiques aren't all negative. Critiques start with the positives in mind as well. I want to thank you for taking time to listen to this podcast. You as a CFI, taking time to listen to this podcast, your students don't realize how good they have it. We say a good pilot is always learning, a good CFI is always learning as well, and you are truly part of the solution. Any CFI who takes time out of his or her busy day to find ways to be a more effective instructor for their students is just such a blessing to the aviation community, and I'm truly honored to serve you and hope, if we haven't met already, to get to meet you one day, because you are part of the solution to getting the accident rate down, and I truly appreciate that. I truly appreciate you sharing this and sharing the good word of M0A.com with your students as well. Enjoy the rest of your day, and most importantly, remember, the good pilot is always learning. Have a great day, guys. We'll see ya. And there you have it, YouTube. There you have it, Facebook. 4 podcasts in one sitting. That is how we batch them out. A little bit of caffeine helped along the way, though, too. That's for sure. I have, normally I stick around for questions and stuff, but I have to go find some dinner, start getting myself ready for the big webinar tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern time. I'm doing a mock check ride live. I'm going to ask you actual FAA check ride questions. You are going to comment with your what you believe are the most appropriate or the correct answers, and I'm going to work to help formulate those correct answers for you as well. So 8 p.m. Eastern tonight. I hope to see you there. Count on that. Facebook, YouTube, it'll be live. Then there'll be a little countdown just before that as well. Work on getting these podcasts edited, so those can be up for you as well. YouTube, Facebook, enjoy the rest of your day. See you at 8 p.m. And most importantly, remember, the good pilot is always learning. Have a great day, guys. We'll see you.